John has questions that a creationist sent him about the early appearance of evolution of biological cells. So it's time for Forrest to weigh in. Welcome, John.
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks for having me on the show. I was on a long Quora conversation with an evolutionist, with a creationist, and he set me 5 challenges. Now, we may not have time to go through them all, but here's an idea of what they were. So to start with, he says, evolution is built upon a house of cards. And then to end, he said, after the 5 challenges, he says, all of this will need to be shown possible before evolution could ever have a chance to be scientifically sound. Now you'll get a great gist of where this guy's coming from with the first challenge, which is prove that the first ever atheist's lone isolated cell could have formed without there ever having been a previous cell.
Did he call the cell an atheist?
Yeah. Oh, the atheist's lone isolated cell. It's mine. It's ours.
Cool.
It's our
Rad. Yeah.
It was ours back in whenever, you know. So that's the first question. I don't know. So if you don't answer this, Forrest,
it's all fucked.
Creationism wins.
Yep, that is how science works. Absolutely. So like I would just throw out the fact that like abiogenesis is something that's currently being studied pretty hard by astrobiologists. And this is something that I talked about very briefly, I think, on one of the other ACA shows I was on, but just to summarize very quickly, because I know we're out of time, is that there are, complex organic molecules that you need to make a cell. And these complex organic molecules self-assemble. They do this all by themselves. So for example, proteins, right? Proteins are made of amino acids, and we have countless experiments showing the amino acids form all by themselves in really rudimentary, mundane conditions. And people like to point to the Urey-Miller experiment or something and say, like, that's one that I use in class all the time. And people like say, well, this is the scientists contaminated it, they messed it up, or whatever. Okay, we found amino acids on asteroids in space. So like there's amino acids floating around on comets right now. What scientists contaminated those? So these things form by themselves. Amino acids don't make proteins by themselves, but or that doesn't equal a protein. But to form a protein out of an amino acid is dehydration synthesis. You literally just stick the 2 ends together, pop out a water molecule, and you've got it. So it's not magic. It's something that can happen. Other important things, nucleotides that make nucleic acids like DNA and RNA. We have found all 5 possible nitrogenous bases, adenine, thymine, cytosine, guanine, and uracil. We have found all of them also on shit from space, meteors falling down, and we test the meteors, and they, sure enough, have all the building blocks of DNA right there in them. When we look at another important macromolecule is lipids. When we look at simple lipids, we have oils. They naturally form into what are called micelles, little bubbles of oil that have hydrophobic ends on one side and hydrophilic end on the other side. They look exactly like a cell membrane, except usually they're only single layered, which isn't that hard to fix. So all of the things that make life naturally form all by themselves, and they naturally do the things that they do inside human bodies all by themselves. The complex pathways. One of my favorite parts of my undergrad during my first biology degree was studying cell signaling and these long chemical pathways that tell your body what to do. And I was so blown away by them. Like, how in the hell does this cell get this molecule and know what it's doing and turn itself on and off and do all this stuff? And when you dig into it, it's the most basic laws of chemistry and physics that these things stick together, and you have a conformational change in this protein. This sticking in there forces it to change shape, and then it does a new thing, because that's how proteins work. So it's not any kind of magical signal. Nothing's in there reading little memos. It's just basic chemical laws. So yeah, that's what I would throw out there, is that, like, as far as the first atheist cells, obviously we don't know what they look like. We can't go get one. They don't really fossilize, but we can say that all of the parts of life form naturally all by themselves, and they do all of the things that they do inside living organisms all by themselves. So to say that one thing happened and then started doing the other thing isn't as crazy as a lot of people like to make it sound. Abiogenesis, of course, has not been observed, but it's something we have a pretty solid handle on, and we're always learning more about. And people should go check out the Astrobiology Primer. You can download it for free from NASA.
That help, John?
Yeah, I've got 4 more, but you may have answered all of them with that.
Oh, hell yeah. I'm an overachiever. What can I say?
I tell you what I'd like to do real quick, John.
Okay.
Just for clarity, I want you just list off the other 4, just so that we have that list. We may or may not address them since we're over time, but I'd like to know what they are.
Yeah, sure. Okay, here's number 2. Prove that the atheist's first ever lone isolated cell could have evolved into the atheist's first ever single-celled organism. Number 3, show how a cell could live for billions of years without a mechanism to transform an energy source into fuel. How one could have formed DNA that would have been needed to transform energy into fuel. Number 4, how a cell without DNA could have begun to replicate. And lastly, number 5, and prove that any single-celled organism replicated multi-celled organisms.
Yeah, so I would just throw out there. I obviously I can't go through all those, but like I would just really quickly throw out that on question 2, they said that that a single cell could be a single-celled organism. If it's alive, it is a single-celled. What? But anyway, the life doesn't have a set definition. It has 7 qualifications that make us call a thing alive, and not all living things meet all 7, and it's the whole thing. But among those in the definition are energy conversion and replication. So like if something can't convert energy and reproduce, like those are the things that we use to define a living thing. Again, it's not necessarily part of, like, if you're born infertile, it doesn't mean you're not alive, but like by asking the second question, they fucked the next 3. So like
it's cut out. I can't hear.
That's all right.
I was just saying, by asking the second question, they kind of screwed the next 3, because like in order for us to consider it an organism, it would already be doing all the other things that so like they kind of have them out of order there.
I have one final thing to add on to this, John, before we go on to our last call, and that's this. I find it just absolutely maddeningly, a little bit amusing, but frustrating, that a creationist came up to you and gave you 5 very specific questions of prove this and this and this and this. And if you can't do it, evolution is a lie. Well, the person who presented those questions does not have an understanding of science in general, or the science specifically to this. But I could provide a response that says, even if no one on the planet is able to demonstrate the 5 things you wanted to prove, that in no way demonstrates that the God you believe in is real and is a better or more reasonable explanation for this. That proposition needs its own question. And why is it that when atheists, made up of atheist cells, begin to ask specific questions about gods, and how do you know a God exists, and how do you know a God can manifest in reality, and what are the capabilities of this God, and what are the thoughts of this God, and how do you know the capabilities and thoughts of this God? These are kind of generalized questions that aren't nearly as specific as prove a cell could live for billions of years without an external energy source, which isn't even something somebody's proposing. They can't answer any of those things. And it's the reason there's over 1,000 denominations of Christianity, and there's one accepted theory of biology by means of natural selection.
Yeah. I mean, I've had various conversations with creationists on Quora, and I've always asked, please provide me with some evidence of creationism. And all they provide is some kind of sort of bullshit nonsense about how evolution is false, and crazy questions and challenges like these. I mean, with this one, from what you've just said, I think I can go back and say, well, what about the first Buddhists? isolated cell. And how would they deal with that?
Right.
On that note, John, I got to thank you and move on. We got one more call we got to get to for the end of the show, but I appreciate it. Thanks for.
By the way, I saw some folks in the chat asking what I was talking about. I just reached, it's right here on the shelf behind me. This is the Astrobiology primer. You can download it from nasa.gov. Primer, Primer. It's only about 500 pages long. This is version 2.0 that's out right now. They're about to release 3.0 with our more modern understanding. One of my friends is a fellow working on it right now. So you can download that for free, and it's only like 500 pages, and it tells you all our best understanding of how, universes, or how solar systems form, how planets form, how life forms, all sorts of really cool stuff. Fascinating thing. You can read it easily.